If everyone can make sure to mute themselves, please.
Continue working or start working on your research. So if today's class and tomorrow's class.
Everyone, please mute yourselves.
Can we have your attention, please? We're going to get started. Good morning, candidates, students, staff, and members of the public. We would like to welcome you to the 2021 School District 20 All Candidates Forum. My name is Cindy and this is Reese, and we will be the moderators for the forum today. In terms of logistics, everyone, please mute yourselves. Turn off your cameras unless you are a candidate or someone asking questions. Candidates, please unmute yourselves when it is your turn to speak. We will start with a land acknowledgement from Mr. Garland.
Thank you very much, Charles. Can everybody hear me okay? I see thumbs up. My name is Mr. Garland. I'm one of the vice principals at JL Pro. I also identify as a teacher, as a coach, and as an Indigenous person. As a person with mixed Indigenous ancestry, I'd like to begin today by first expressing that acknowledgement is so much more than just words written out before a meeting or a gathering. It's a well-rooted recognition of all those that came before us. As a guest,
the picture there.
I am full of gratitude to be able to work, live, play, and learn in this area. This unceded territory of the Sinaiaks, Interior Salish. We're stewards of this land since time immemorial. I would also like to acknowledge that we are truly products of our environment, and the water that flows beside us in the Columbia River is the same water that flows through all of our veins here in this area. So we are connected by so much more than our classrooms. We are connected so much more than our hallways, our communities. We are connected by a much deeper root than that. And that's what a land acknowledgement is. It's acknowledging that we are part of something so much greater than just ourselves. So with that, I would like to say thank you. Buksteap, Lim Lim.
While this is starting, I'm gonna pass out permission forms, please. It's just for walking trips. So as soon as I get them all in, we can go to Gyro, we can go downtown.
If everyone could please mute themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. We would like to express our gratitude to all the candidates for making time to be here today. It's important for our democracy, and the students are looking forward to learning about your platforms. We will start with a short introduction from each of the candidates, starting with alphabetical order from blah, blah, with Mr. Cannings. You each have a maximum of 2 minutes. Richard Cannings, please start.
Thank you, Lim Lim. Good morning, Jael Crow, and thank you for organizing this forum. I always enjoy speaking to young people. These school forums always have a wide variety of important questions that really show how well informed and engaged you are. Et je vous remercie pour poser la question en français et en anglais. Je répondrai en anglais parce que même si j'étudie français tous les jours, je ne suis pas encore bilingue. I want to start also by acknowledging that we're meeting on the unceded territories of the Syilx, the Sinais, the Ktunaxa, and Secwepemc peoples. And it's been an honor to represent South Okanagan West Kootenay as your member of parliament for the last 6 years. I'm a biologist who entered politics a few years ago to be a voice for science in Ottawa. And as I said off the top, I've spoken with a lot of schools over that time because it's so important that young people understand how government works and why it's critical that you're engaged with the political process. Young people are the future. We hear that all the time. The decisions we make in Ottawa will affect you long after I've left the scene, whether those decisions are about climate change, income inequality, or the unfair cost of post-secondary education. The NDP know that we can create a better Canada. A Canada with a wealth tax, so pandemic costs are paid by the super rich, not by those who've been struggling. A Canada with more inclusive healthcare, so that everyone can afford to fill their prescriptions, everyone can go to the dentist, and mental health care is fully funded. A Canada where everyone can afford to have a roof over their head, and everyone has access to clean drinking water. No more excuses. And a Canada where we listen to scientists and take the urgent, bold steps necessary to fight climate change. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP pledge to create this new, greener, fairer, more prosperous Canada. And I hope you enjoy the forum.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Next, we will hear from Tara House.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to have this opportunity. I loved the forum in 2019 when we were in person, but I do appreciate being able to do it at least via Zoom or Teams this time. And Mr. Garland, I really do appreciate the land acknowledgement, and I appreciate the additional words that you added to that. And it really does warm my heart to hear that these types of acknowledgements are becoming normalized on, especially with our youth in these types of forums. So thank you to everyone involved in that. So I am Tara Howes, and I am your Green Party candidate. And I do say I am your candidate, recognizing that most of you can't vote yet. But at the end of the day, it is about your future. The decisions that are being made are going to directly impact you and your future and what you can do. And so with that, I really feel it's important to have your voice heard. And that's what I can do, is I can listen. The Green Party has long supported and advocated for lowering the voting age to 16. And it's because of this need to listen to you and for you to have an impact and an input on the decisions that are going to be made. I do want to thank you so much to all the teachers involved in organizing this. It really is so important to create these opportunities for young people to become involved and engaged. And it truly does make a difference. And I want to give a little shout out to some Crow students, to Oliver and Spencer and Will and Seti. Thank you so much for your engagement, and I hope you can continue talking to your friends and your families about politics. Because when I'm at the door and when I'm speaking with young people, I'm hearing kind of two things. We have people that are concerned about the planet, this new term, eco-anxiety, that didn't exist 10 years ago. This is a real issue, and it really has a huge impact. And the other piece, more for the slightly older students, are concerns about affordability as they're heading into college or university, worried about how to pay for tuition or housing or even food security. And so once again, I'm so grateful for this opportunity because I think it is so important for us to speak with you, but more importantly, to actually listen. Thank you.
And Helena Conans.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me here this morning, for inviting all of us. It's so exciting that, that you're back at school. I want to thank all the teachers and administrators. I want to thank all of you students for, I know it's been a very difficult year and you guys are making things happen, and the administration to make this event happen it really blows me away. This is the only school in our riding that was able to do this. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, because I think that there should be a diverse group of people that are in leadership in Canada, and all of you can do that too, I know. My background is that I used to play on the professional tennis tour. I traveled the world, Wimbledon, the US Open. I played and I was ranked in the world when I was younger. And then I'm also a 7-time Canadian tennis champion. I also at one time worked for Nike at their corporate headquarters. But I also have had a small business here in Penticton with my family for 25 years. I am a small business coach for a company called Community Futures, a nonprofit group, and I really like working with youth. I've been a tennis coach at Penticton Secondary School for 10 years. I was the coach for 10 years. And also I've worked with the leadership groups of both high schools in the area. And I really like to inspire youth, especially, and I know this is a question coming up, but I really want to inspire youth to get involved in the community, and for you to get involved in the community and to get involved in local politics and in your community, because you can make a difference. I know that you can, and this is the first step. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to this event this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conans. Now we'll hear from Ken Robertson.
Yes, hello, good morning, Crow. My name is Ken Robertson. My spirit name is Squalux. I am from the Nisqually people located in Shawmekulu, or Shawmek people. I'm a father of 4, and that, I find it very, not just informative, but checking the pulse with students, future leaders in regards to political structures, but also helping them understand our parliamentary systems. And that as we all look towards the future, we all have an interest when it comes to these issues at hand, and I look forward to answering all your questions when it comes to this. As the Liberal Party, we do have a very comprehensive, costed and vetted plan when it comes to combating climate change, to people's rights, to also COVID as well. And I look forward to all of your questions, but hearing from you more importantly, not just listening, because that's what it's about. But thank you so much for hosting this as well, to the teachers and to the students in District 20, and that, I'm very appreciative, and I appreciate the land acknowledgement as a Shawmek person, because my bloodlines go back 30,000 years, and that is important that we are, and we were stewards of the lands, but we have a very vital role in the future as well. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. And finally, Sean Taylor.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm Sean Taylor. I'm the People's Party of Canada candidate for South Okanagan and West Kootenay. And holy moly, here we are. No one's really talking about the elephant in the room. I went out for pizza last night and was denied, was asked to show a vaccine passport, was asked to show government ID for a pizza. This is where we're at in our nation right now. We're at a critical juncture, and I apologize. It makes me sad when I look at the screen here and I see your beautiful faces covered up with masks that do nothing but depersonalize. The fact that we can't have this talk face to face, there's reasons for this. And I don't know if any of you got the sneaky suspicion that you're being lied to about a whole bunch of things, but we're in trouble in this nation, and not just our nation. This is going on all over the world. My background, I've been a paramedic, a firefighter, a member of the Canadian Armed Forces for 19 years, most of that in the infantry. I did a combat tour in Afghanistan where I worked with a psychological operations team. And I've been an emergency nurse for the last 16 years. And I got to tell you, the things that we're seeing happen in this country today are alarming. And it's falling to you guys. This just crazy amount of money printing that's been going on over the last 18 months, that's going to fall on your shoulders. And I apologize. The torch you're being handed is a heavy one, and you face a lot of difficulties in the future. As a People's Party candidate, I feel that Canada's...
I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, but your time is up.
All right.
Thank you.
And now we will be moving on to the questions that have been developed by students across the district. Candidates, if you could please keep your responses to a maximum of 1 minute each, and we unfortunately do not have time for back and forth debating. Due to limitation with Microsoft Teams, we will not be able to spotlight each candidate during their response, as this is being recorded. Candidates will respond in alphabetical order so that students can easily keep track of who's speaking. The first question is...
Pour quelle raison est-ce que les adolescents devraient s'intéresser aux politiques?
And now Richard Cannings.
Well, thank you for that question. And as several people said in introductions, including myself, you know, young people are the future, and they have the most at stake. You have the most at stake. We're facing a climate crisis. We're facing a housing crisis. It's very, very difficult to access post-secondary education when that is really demanded of young people. And all these things, all these crises, these difficulties have happened because of political decisions that have been made over the past 30 years. So you have a huge stake in politics, in what goes on in Ottawa or Victoria or in the Trail City Hall. And we need to think of the future. And so many decisions tend to be made by older people like myself. And, you know, I have a grandchild, I have kids, so I can sense what they're concerned about. But we have to fight the climate crisis like we really mean it. We have to tackle the housing crisis and make post-secondary education more affordable to young people. It's impossible now. They're graduating with $28,000 in debt on average. And the NDP also believes that we should lower the voting age to 16 because you are the people that...
I'm sorry. Apologies, Mr. Canning, but your time is up and we will have to move on. Thank you very much. And now we will have Tara House speaking.
Thank you. I mean, why should you care? You know, Mr. Canning said, you know, and I've said it, and we've all said this, it's because it is your future. And at the end of the day, it's because your voice matters. I believe you're intelligent. I believe you have opinions, and those need to be heard. But I'm not worried about that because, I mean, look at these questions. We've got 2 pages of questions. And from what I understand, those were already skimmed down from even a larger set. You already do care about politics, and it's wonderful to see. Now it's just about learning how the system works. You know, how can we better support you in ensuring that you continue voting throughout your whole life? How can we better support you in staying engaged and pushing for the changes that you want to see? And so this is why it's important to have these forums and to give you that voice, because ultimately yes, this is about you. Politics is about you, whether we have a skate park or whether we're talking a climate change. We really need to be listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. House. And now we will have Helena Conans.
Yes, hi, Helena Conans, Conservative Party. Yeah, all the candidates are saying you are the future, but guess what? You're the present too. So you can make a difference right now. There are things you can do in your community that you can get involved with, that you can make a huge difference. You walk down the streets and trail or in the community you live in, and you don't like that there's no street lights, or you don't like the fact that your favorite stores have to close early. You can actually get involved. I'll give you an example. A very good example is your city committees are always looking for young people to join them. And if you get a hold of the local committees in Trail or in your communities, the municipal committees, they would love to have your input. So that is just one example. Google it today, find out what committees you can get involved in, and then you can go from there. But you can make a difference today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conans. And now we have Mr. Robertson.
Yes, thank you for the question. And, you know, it's not just the future, as Helena was saying, it is the present, that there are a lot of activists that are under the age of 18 that do go out and they are part of the political process. And they do have very core values and beliefs. But more importantly is that we have to look at it as a whole of people, that we live in a democracy where the power lies in the voter. A lot of things that they haven't pointed out, for instance, though, in the next generation that do become the age majority, is that you will make up 50% of the voting bloc. That is power. That is voices. That's influential. That's what you could do to change the future of what your values and beliefs are in any political structure, either municipal, provincial, or federal, but that you do matter. And that's why I look at it that there is a bright future tomorrow, just from the long list, as Tara pointed out to the questions. But more importantly,
Very sorry, Mr. Robertson, your time
Thank
is
you
up.
so much.
Thank you very much. And now.
Hey, this is an excellent question. And you know, the question I have is, why didn't my generation care more about politics? We're at where we're at in this country because Canadians have abdicated their responsibility to participate in the governing of their country. Politics is gross. It's full of narcissists and sociopaths. It's gross by design. They don't want average Joe Canadian involved, and getting involved at a young age, figuring out what the hell is going on is so important, because you've got a media that's bought and paid for. You've got corporations that are profiting off this and complicit in the implementation of what we see going on in our country today. And unless you're informed and engaged, you don't have any chance to stop it, because this is going to fall on your shoulders, right? People have abdicated the responsibility, and we're at where we're at today because of the disinterest in politics. So yeah, bang on with the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor.
And now on to the next question. How will you work to control forest fires and deal with their effects? Mr. Cannings, we'll hear from you first.
Well, thanks. And this question, of course, is on the tops of minds of everyone in British Columbia and across the country after this summer. And it's, a lot of people don't understand that in fighting climate change, if we stopped all our emissions today, we would still be left with the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that would still create the same risk of forest fires for years to come. That will not change. So we have to get into the adaptation game. And I've been pushing the government for the last 6 years to provide more funding to let communities and individuals fire smart their communities by going out, thinning the forests around the edges of communities. This costs money, but it provides jobs to forestry workers. It provides fiber for mills, and it's a big win-win proposition. But we have to spend the money. the NDP has proposed a $3 billion fund to do just that, not only to deal with the risk of forest fires, but also other climate-related things like floods. We had Grand Forks tragically
I'm sorry,
flooded.
Mr. Cannings, but your time is up. Tara Howes, we'll now hear from you.
This was a really bad year for a number of people across our riding in regards to forest fires. And what we have to start saying is taking a strong stance and saying we need to address the fact that we are mismanaging our forests completely. The best way to prevent forest fires is to ensure we have stands of old growth, which act as a fire suppressant. So it helps keep moisture in the ground. The industrial forestry sector right now is clear cutting. It's creating slope instability, and it is contributing up to 3 to 4 times actually of disasters, which includes mudslides, floods, and forest fires. So we first have to just stop how we're destroying our forests right now and shift to a conservation effort, and really protect land defenders that are out there trying to protect our watersheds, and Indigenous-led conservation areas need to be invested in. But we really need to start standing up and saying, we need to stop logging old growth forests. These are huge, huge supports in preventing forest fires across this country. Yeah.
Your time is up, sorry. Now Ms. Helena Conans.
Thank you for that question. It was a horrible summer, but guess what? Last year was too, and the year before. I think government needs to decide finally that this isn't an unusual thing. This is going to happen every year. So we need to have the firefighting capabilities ready at the beginning of the summer, no matter how, even if it looks like it's not going to be a hot summer, we need to be ready. The NDP called a state of emergency way too late. Unfortunately, towns were burnt down, people lost their lives. Let's just get ready before every summer so that we know, so we don't act surprised when we see the smoke in the air and we have to listen to, go to the internet, listen to the news to find out if a fire is imminent around our homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conans. Now, Ken Robertson.
Yes, thank you. My grandmother taught me at a young age that traditionally we had to burn control burns around our villages on the reservation to protect what's most important, which is houses and, more importantly, our families. But the thing I look at is the short-term, long-term. Short-term, the Liberal Party of Canada, we train and hire 1,000 new firefighters with a $500 million fund, but also buying Canadian-made aircrafts that would suppress the fires, for instance. So when the provinces do call for help, that we are ready for them. But in the long term, we have an aggressive climate change that we committed to the Paris Accord, and that we actually accelerated those plans in regards to by putting price on pollution, to transformative green technology, which we'll get into later. But these short terms for forest fires, we have to start looking at it in regards to short-term and long-term effects, but also solutions. And the Liberal Party of Canada has a more comprehensive plan when it comes to these details, and details matter. A lot of them don't talk about the details when it comes to these things, but I do, because I've seen it beforehand with my reservations, with fires, time and time again. It is getting worse. But I thank you for the question, and it does matter to me especially, because our homes and families are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Sean Taylor.
Yeah, Tara hit the nail on the head there. Forest management, like we've been dealing with decades of forest mismanagement, and you've got these unprecedented fuel levels. One of the things that I'd like to know more about as well is we have these treaties with agreements with the United States and the United Nations. So the agreement between Canada and the United States of America relating to the exchange of information on weather modification activities. And you can look at this up on the Government of Canada website if you're interested. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but over the last couple of years, the amount of chemtrails in this area are just increasing exponentially. And we know that the nano aluminum that they're spraying to use the weather modification technologies is alkalizing the soils. And the fact that aluminum is added to rocket fuel might have something to do when you're hosing your forests down with it. We have our governments disclose this to each other, what they're doing, but they're not telling the public about what they're doing. I think we need more transparency of that, and possibly being able to use.
Mr. Taylor.
All right, thanks.
We will now be moving on to the next question, and many students would like to ask, how are you planning to help end homelessness and make housing affordability a priority in communities?
Well, this is a great question, and the housing crisis is one of the top issues that I hear, and it's certainly one of the issues that is facing young people in this country. It also, obviously affects the homeless. It affects young people looking to move out and find a place to rent. It affects young families trying to buy their own first home. And the solution to this, every expert will tell you, is to build houses, to give the homeless homes. And if the federal government got out of the affordable housing game 30 years ago, and we have built up a huge deficit in the number of affordable homes in Canada. And the NDP would catch up on that by building 500,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years, so that every Canadian could have a roof over their head, because every Canadian should have a roof over their head.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings, and Ms. House, you may begin.
Thank you. Housing, to make it a priority, we have to declare it a priority. We have to ensure that housing is a human right, that it's not just a commodity for people. And I am really happy, and I do have kudos for, actually there is a national housing strategy. We haven't had one before. So when that was developed there in 2017, I mean, that's wonderful, but it's time to move on, and we have to start increasing supports to truly address not just homelessness, but near homelessness as well, those people that are on the brink of that. We have to look at what's called wraparound services to ensure that the homeless populations are getting the additional services that are required, which includes everything from substance abuse supports to job seeking and job skills upgrading. And so we have to, again, look at this holistically. Generation Squeeze is a really wonderful organization that has some great products and supports available to government to implement policy. And as an elder millennial, I do feel like I understand the crunch for young Canadians trying to enter the marketplace.
Thank you very much, Ms. House.
Thank you.
Helena Conans, you may begin.
Helena, yeah, thanks so much. Yes, I'm the only one who's running, the only candidate who actually has worked in local government and has actually created policy that has helped to create housing for homeless. So we worked with, on city council, we worked with an organization called 100 Homes, and we were able to bring in hundreds of first stage housing, that's housing for people who are homeless or have unstable housing. And that is important. But unfortunately, one of the things that happened was we worked with the nonprofit 100 Homes, but the NDP government in Victoria promised to offer wraparound services like mental health. And this is throughout our riding, by the way, throughout in many communities. And they promised to offer wraparound services like mental health, substance abuse, security. And unfortunately, they have not done that. So these homes are subsidized. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson, you may begin.
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I have worked in a shelter system, and I've been frontline in regards to this, so I've seen it firsthand and helped those trying to transition. But moreover is that in 2017, as Tara mentioned, that there was a plan announced that we'd reduce chronic homelessness by 50% so we can get work launch over 1,200 projects and helping over 1 million people find a place to call home. But a re-elected Liberal government We first of all appoint a new federal housing advocate within the first 100 days of a new mandate to ensure the federal government work towards eliminating chronic homelessness as well as other housing commitments are fulfilled. Move forward with our plan to invest in Reach Home Canada homelessness strategy to support communities across the country, but the Liberal government plan would support construction of 100,000 middle-class homes, helping more, but also we also setting up a rent-to-own program and also setting up a savings account up to $30,000 for those who are 40 and under to achieve those outcomes, but also building 1.4 million homes. Because as I mentioned before, capacity is the issue as well, but we also need those affordabilities, but having two options for them to look at and make sure that they make those choices of opportunity to be there. So thank you for the question. I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. We'll now be hearing from Sean Taylor.
Yeah, so there's this problem is multifactorial in causation. Let's just start with immigration. We're bringing over 350,000 people to this country every year. That's a lot of homes that are required. And with 40% of them going to Toronto and Vancouver, where we see the most acuity in our housing crisis. Another thing, just strangling construction with costs that are just uneconomical to do these things. The last thing you want is government involved in this. They're just, they're clumsy, they're slow, they're dumb, and they just do a bad job. We need to get out of the way and let the private sector take this. They can solve the problems much better way, and we have to create an environment where it's affordable to do so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor.
We will now be moving on to the next question. What are your plans to tackle the opioid crisis in our area? Mr. Cannings, you can start first.
Well, the opioid crisis has been killing more people in British Columbia than COVID. And it's something that we have to tackle by doing something differently. What we've been doing hasn't been working. So what we have to do to tackle the opioid crisis is to provide a safe supply to people who are struggling with addictions. Right now, they are faced with getting their drugs on the street. Many of those are poisoned, so we have these tragic deaths of young people from fentanyl. And so we have to provide a safe supply, and we have to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of these drugs, because these people aren't criminals. They have a medical condition, and we have to treat it like a medical problem. And by doing that, we would get rid of all the crime associated with drug addiction, because these people would have a safe supply that was given to them. They wouldn't have to go around breaking into homes, stealing bikes, whatever. It would solve so many problems if we only had the political courage to do that, and the NDP would.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. And now we will hear from Ms. House.
We have to declare it an emergency. These are people. They're not just, again, they're not just, they're people that deserve to live with dignity. It's a health crisis. I'm really happy that I was able to support the city of Rossland as they supported a declaration to the federal government to decriminalize. We really need to be focusing once again on treating this as a health issue. The Greens have the highest grade from Mom Stop the Harm on addressing the opioid crisis. And in Trail specifically, we have to be providing community supports to our public health outreach. At the moment, there's no bathrooms for populations to be using after hours. And so these are the types of initiatives that we need to be allowing our local communities to be investing in through public health and evidence-based measures to, like I said, support this as it is, which is a mental health and addictions, not a criminal issue.
Thank you, Ms. House. Now we will hear from Helena Conants.
Thank you for the question. This is a crisis, and we need to treat it like that. My opponents or the other candidates talk about safe supply, which is important, but let's face it, if someone wants to quit drugs, they should be able to. Right now, if someone were to walk up to you in trail and say, you know what, today I've had enough, I want to quit, that they would have to wait 3 or 4 months to get into a treatment bed. And they would have to, and they'd have to leave your community. They'd have to leave trail. And this is throughout our riding and throughout British Columbia and Canada. So the NDP have not offered the wraparound services that are needed, mental health, but also treatment beds. And Conservatives will make sure that there are millions spent on the ability for someone to be able to quit, and they're out there, they want to, and go back to a healthy life if they'd like, if they choose.
Ken Robertson, we'll now hear from you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, first of all, I just want to let you know this did affect me directly, as well as I lost an uncle to the epidemic that is happening in regards to this. But moreover, that when I looked at the Liberal plan, it is one or more of the comprehensive plans. First of all, we'd introduce a comprehensive strategy to address problematic substance abuse to end the opioid crisis, invest $25 million for public education, reduce stigma associated with problematic substance abuse, invest $500 million to support the provinces and territories to provide access to full range of evidence-based treatments, recognize that successful treatment is not determined by long-term abstinence, support provinces and territories in creating standards for substance use treatments programs so that Canadians can access quality evidence-based supports when they need it most. Support the many lower risk and first-time offenders by reforming the criminal code to repeal relevant mandatory minimums, penalties, and require police and Crown prosecutors to consider diverting individuals in the criminal justice. Thank you.
Now we'd like to hear from Sean Taylor.
Again, these incredible questions that could take a week to answer. So there was a paradigm shift that went on starting in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where we deinstitutionalized people because we thought that the money would follow them to the community, and it never did. Right? I think you can judge a society by how well it treats its most vulnerable populations. And as a frontline healthcare worker dealing with this day in and day out, you look at the amount of money being thrown at this to no effect. And this comes down to a personal responsibility thing too. Yes, addiction is a disease, but it's a disease of choice. And you have to have some accountability with that. If we're going to offer these services, you don't get to destroy the communities you live in as well. And the amount of money that we're throwing at this, the crime is still there, and people just ignore it. Like, you walk the streets of Vancouver these days, it's...
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
You guys run a tight ship.
The next question we will be asking is, how will you better support LGBTQS2QS plus people within our society?
Well, thank you for this really important question. And, you know, I have to say that the attitudes, the legislation that Canada has enacted over the past few decades has greatly improved the support for people with, you know, various sexual orientations and gender identity. And I'm proud that the NDP federally have been really leading the charge there. But there is so much more that we have to do. We have to immediately legislate a ban on conversion therapy. The Liberals introduced legislation to that, but didn't move it forward in anywhere near a timely fashion, then called this election. So we have to get that back on the table. You know, I was donating blood a couple of weeks ago, and if you're asked the question, are you a man that has had sex with a man? And if you are, there is real restrictions on whether you can donate blood or not. The science doesn't back that up at all, but we are still discriminating against homosexual men. And so we have to tackle all these issues, ensure that there's equal access to gender confirming procedures and medications across the country. These are things that we know in our hearts are the right thing to do.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Cannings. Tara House, you may begin.
Just like any discrimination, we have to ensure that we're standing up and verbally saying, calling out people when things are wrong. I have been wearing my ally pin here. It's something that I do stand up for, and I call out discrimination when I see it. The fact that we still have a blood ban, the fact that conversion therapy wasn't passed, these are all just political games, and people are playing with people's lives here. Suicide rates are incredibly high amongst our queer community. And it sickens me that these bills did not get passed through. And again, this is just something that we should not be standing for. They should have passed through. I'm so happy the Green Party was the first federal party to call for equality in marriage, because that's what the Greens do, is we fundamentally believe in standing up for people. But some more specifics would be, in addition to addressing gender affirming and hormone treatment therapy in our health system, we also have to actually start training people. We have to start ensuring that our justice system, our healthcare workers, our educators, they all actually understand the historical atrocities that have occurred against our queer community and why it's so important to respect things, just things like pronouns, and why this is so important to be pushing
Thank
forward.
you very much, Ms.
Thank
House.
you.
We will now be hearing from Helena Conans. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I promise that I will represent everyone in my riding, regardless of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and I will fight for equal rights. We have to stand up to make sure there is no discrimination happening here, as the other candidates have mentioned. I'm the only one here who actually walked in the 2019 Gay Pride Parade in Kelowna. I know that conservatives want everyone to have a safe and inclusive places to go. I can tell you, my friends and family who are members of the LGBTQ community, they don't necessarily even walk parades, or they don't necessarily fight for rainbow sidewalks. What they want is to not be discriminated against and to be treated equally. And that is what I promise to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conans. We will now be hearing from Mr. Robertson.
Yes, thank you for the question. First thing I'm going to just clarify is that it was a Liberal government that did legalize gay marriage in here in Canada. But moreover, that I have marched in not just Vancouver as well as Toronto Pride, which are one of the biggest ones. But the other points that I wanted to point out with you is that we want to obviously support those in the community at large by completing the federal action plan within the first 100 days in office, providing $40 million over 4 years, starting in 2021 for capacity building funding for Canadian LGBTQ2 service organizations, reintroduce the legislations within the first 100 days in office to eliminate the practice of conversion therapy for everyone, and extend the coverage of the ban to include people over the age of 18, ensuring the cost of vitro fertilizer or IVF become an eligible health expenditure under the Assisted Human Reproductive Act, expanding medical expense tax credits to include.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you.
We'll now be hearing from Mr. Taylor.
I can't keep up these intersectionality games. Nothing. Okay? I don't care who you love, the color of your skin, the church you go to. Our plans for all Canadians. And this focusing on siloing people, pitting one group against the other, you're being oppressed by you guys. We live in an awesome country that is one of the most open and caring societies on the planet. And this corrosive narrative that they're pushing everywhere, and everyone's special, you're not special, you're Canadian, all right? And we work for all Canadians. So I don't have a plan for the LGBTQS plus, whatever that means. Yeah, I've got friends that are gay. They're just my friends. I don't care, right? And the more we focus on this, the more division. It's the love part. We need to be more tolerant with each other and stop focusing on our differences.
Thank you so very much, Sean.
Now on to the next question. How would you make sure that universal health care includes universal access to mental health support? Mr. Cannings, you can start.
Well, thank you. And of course, our universal healthcare system that we are so proud of in Canada happened back in the 1960s when I was in your place in school, because the NDP pushed for it. It was Tommy Douglas and the NDP that created universal healthcare. And part of that vision of the NDP was mental health care. It was pharmacare, dental care, eye care, all those things, they're all parts of our body. They're all parts of our health. And we need to bring all of those into our universal healthcare system. Mental health is such a critical support that many young people need, and it's very important that they get those supports quickly and rapidly, or it could turn into something that affects them for the rest of their lives. We have to have quick intervention. Right now, you often have to pay for mental health supports, or you have to wait a year. Well, that's too long for many people. Many people are fighting with suicide and
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Now we'll hear from Ms. House.
Yeah, mental health, the first thing that we have to really address is that things like suicide prevention hotlines are wonderful, and we do need those, but we have to start actually looking at these root causes of mental health. And this includes addressing eco-anxiety and climate impacts. This involves addressing affordability and the stresses involved with not being able to have food on your table, to be able to pay rent. I'm sure we all know provincial jurisdiction is largely delivering the services of health, but we have the Canada Health Act that we could be renegotiating. A couple things need to happen. We need to prioritize mental health within the Canada Health Act, and we also need to start redistributing how we are making that funding. The current funding model means that our economic output of a province determines how much money you get. And that means nothing, especially in rural areas. We need to base it on population and need. And that includes investing in internet and communication infrastructure to allow for remote services. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. House. We will now hear from Ms. Conans.
Thank you. Mental health is going to be the #1 issue that I will be focusing on as an MP. It is a crisis, and I have lost too many people close to me, young people, to this. And I will do something about this. The Conservative Party will do something about this. We will invest millions into mental health services throughout the country and in our riding. But right now, it's important to know that there are thousands of people throughout our riding without a primary doctor, without a doctor to even be able to tell that they're not feeling well. We have a gateway system in our health, and without a primary doctor, no one will be able to tell unless your family, friends, hopefully you reach out. But we need to fix that system first. And then we need to invest in mental health, because especially after what's happened in the last year, we're all going to need to have those services.
Thank you, Ms. Conans. Now, Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, thank you for the question. First of all, that we can't afford a two-tier system, which means a profit system and a universal health care, which the Conservatives are proposing right now. Just to get that out of the way, that it's clear, I do believe in a universal free health care in Canada. We have to look at it as that we are going to invest $28 billion for healthcare. We've offered $10 billion in new funding in the 2021-22 budget, with $4 billion on that already announced in the federal budget. In total, $6 billion would be used to cut wait lists for treatment, and $3.2 billion would be used to hire 7,500 doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners. With the rest going towards virtual care improvements in rural and health, the Liberals also promised $4.5 billion over 5 years to provinces for mental health services to move forward on a national and universal pharmacare program, which we established.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, universal access to mental health supports. How about universal access to anything right now? Our healthcare system is in crisis and crumbling before our eyes. And as far as the mental health goes, maybe if the other 4 parties on this panel would stop supporting the pumping of fear porn into everyone's living room 24/7, we wouldn't have the mental health issues that we're having today. Okay, we've become a one disease healthcare system. The amount of people that I've been watching die from cancers that have never been taken care of. My own mom just had surgery 2 days ago from a diagnosis at the end of March. Like, this is insane what's going on in our healthcare system right now. And as they run it off a cliff, money isn't the answer. We need a rethinking of this. And mental health, it's always been the redheaded stepchild of healthcare, always the least funded. And that's why we have that's the thing, right? You look at these problems and how they bleed into each other. This is all right.
The next question is, do you believe vaccine passports violate human rights?
Well, in a word, no. You know, our rights end where they infringe on the rights of other people, where they affect other people. We don't have the right to drive without a driver's license or drive through a stop sign or drive on the left side of the road, because that's dangerous. And right now we're in a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Vaccinations are the way that we have to get us past the COVID crisis. And right now it's filling up our hospitals, it's filling up our ICUs with COVID patients who are dying. And as Sean said, it's putting off important cancer treatments, it's putting off cardiac treatments, it's affecting other people. So the restrictions that we can lift so that we can get businesses back open, we can do that with people who are vaccinated, who don't pose those risks to themselves and the communities and our children. So no, they don't violate human rights. The vaccinations are our way forward out of this crisis and back to a healthier Canada.
Thanks. I'll just jump in here. And I mean, just the recognition that this is a provincial health order, and so the federal government can't overturn that provincial health order. But in a nutshell, no, I don't believe it violates human rights, but I believe it has been poorly planned and poorly implemented, and it is disproportionately impacting people, including our small businesses, who are being required to enforce this, which is additional costs. And once again, just a top-down approach to something that should be local and community-based. You know, I'm hearing from libraries even, you know, they might have to turn people away to access services, or once again, the staff are having to enforce whether or not people have that. And that's not the role for our libraries and small businesses to be playing. So I would rather be taking these types of initiatives and doing things at a community-based public health and outreach community level, rather than, once again, this top-down approach, which, like I said, disproportionately impacts people.
Thank you very much, Ms. House. We will now be hearing from Helena Conans.
Yes, I believe vaccine passports are one tool in a tool chest that we can use to eradicate or to address the COVID pandemic. But this has been incredibly politicized. Do you think isn't it unusual that this was announced the week here in BC that of the last of the federal election? The other parties are creating fissures in our community when right now we should be coming together. We should be having some compassion. The NDP in Victoria have announced this vaccine passport without any exemptions for people who actually have some medical issues. They're scared. They're calling me. What do I do? They don't get any information from their doctor. There are some people that can't because of religious reasons. We need to come together as Canadians, not be split apart. This is the time whenever we've had a tough time, Canadians have come together, and we will now. But we need to stop politicizing this issue.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conans. Mr. Robertson, you may begin.
Yes, well, I echo Richard in regards to that there is a certain extent that when it becomes public health, we have to understand that these are for the general interest of the common people and those that are affected by it. You know, I lost my grandmother to COVID. You know, those were the things that I was affected by. But moreover is that as a Liberal government will require the travelers on interprovincial, which the Conservatives won't even talk about, for commercial flights, cruise ships, rail, ensuring vaccines across the public federal public services. As the country's largest employer, this will be protected under the health and safety. We're also launching $1 billion proof of vaccine fund to support those provinces as well. We have taken a stand when it comes to this as well and supporting the provinces that ask for it. But at the same time, we have to look at it is that we don't want this COVID to go on any longer than it should.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings. Or Mr. Robertson. Now we'll be hearing from Sean Taylor.
Absolutely. We've heard from the other candidates. Their parties all support this. We're the only party that's standing up against this. Okay, and just back to observed reality. When you hear Angela Merkel say build back better, and Justin Trudeau say build back better, and Joe Biden say build back better, and Aaron O'Toole say build back stronger, they're reading from the same script, okay? They're lying to you about what's going on. And with the media that's bought and paid for, it's insane. I've been an emergency nurse for 16 years. Like, oh my God, the ICUs are full. The ICUs are always full. Okay, I've been babysitting vented patients in the emergency since I started because there's no room upstairs. This is always a moving target, right? And even they trust that you don't have the context to be able to interpret what you're hearing on the news because you have no exposure to it. That's what they do. If you're an electrician, you come home all day.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Now we'll be moving on to the next question. How does your party plan to transition from renewable energy?
Well, thanks for this important question because it's really at the heart of, you know, how we're going to tackle the climate crisis. How are we going to move rapidly into, you know, 2040, 2050 when we cannot be putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And, you know, there are several sectors of our economy that are really the low-hanging fruit, the easy way to do it. One is transportation. We have to make sure that all cars are electric within 20 years, within 10 years if we can. For the big transportation, you know, heavy-duty trucks, we have to use fuel like hydrogen. Canada is a leader in the hydrogen sector. We have to have a government that will build that hydrogen infrastructure. We have to build new passive buildings that don't use energy. We have to retrofit all our buildings so that they're in that same state. This all takes big government investments and commitments, and the NDP is willing to do that. It has to be done. And we have to get the provinces on side in terms of moving that electricity across Canada so that clean energy from British Columbia can flow to Alberta, clean energy from Manitoba can flow to Saskatchewan. Those interties cost billions of dollars. We have to make that commitment. We've learned what we can do in this pandemic when we have the political will. So let's do it. You know, the world depends on it. Other countries are way ahead of us.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. Now, Ms. House, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about Sean's comments for a second because this is blatant lies that we need to be calling out. The KBRH operating room, that's our local hospital, has had to shut down their surgeries to allow for beds to support ICU. This is unprecedented. This is just blatant lies, and we need to be calling out.
It's not unprecedented, Tara.
It is
okay?
unprecedented.
How,
it is
Mr.
Taylor,
this is not a debate. Please mute yourself while other candidates are speaking. Thank you very much.
So we need to be addressing these lies that are coming out. As far as the actual question, I will answer that. To transition to renewable energy, we have to stop funding the fossil fuel industry. I was the first candidate to stand up and sign against the Trans Mountain expansion. I'm the only candidate that has said I will stand up against subsidizing the Coastal GasLink with the LNG project. LNG is fossil fuels, and so unless we get off LNG, then we will never stop subsidizing fossil fuels. So we need to recognize that governments that are saying they're going to continue supports of the LNG sector, which includes fracking, we're not actually transitioning off fossil fuels. So we need to start that plan. We needed to have started it 40 years ago when Shell and Exxon said, oh, this is kind of bad for the environment. We've known about this for decades. It's time to implement action now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. House. We would now like to hear from Ms. Conans.
Yes, Conservatives will fight climate change and protect the environment. You can look at our platform on conservative.ca, but you will also see that when you look there that we are the only party that will do this, will reach our goals, but won't lose jobs, your parents' jobs or your jobs in the meantime. We will make sure we won't do it on the backs of working Canadians. There's a lot of people in this riding who live places in this rural South Okanagan, West Kootenay, that it takes an hour for them to drive to their doctor's appointment, an hour if they have a doctor, an hour for them to drive to the grocery store along gravel roads, and they cannot drive an electric vehicle. Conservatives have a plan to bring more electric vehicles and hydro vehicles on board, but we will not do it on the back of working people and of people who live in rural communities who are not able to have electric cars.
Now, Mr. Robertson, we would love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, introduce a clean energy standard that will set Canada on a path to cut more emissions by 2030 and achieve 100% net zero emitting electricity system by 2035. Develop additional investment tax credits for a range of renewable energies, battery storage solutions to accelerate development of clean energy, create a pan-Canadian grid council to promote the infrastructure investments, smart grids, grid integrations, and electricity sector innovations with the goal of making Canada the most reliable, cost-effective, and carbon-free electrical producer in the world. Delivering on our climate commitments, a price on pollution, cap and cut emissions from oil and gas, phasing out, can't cut out the oil and gas right away, you have to phase it out, cutting methane emissions, eliminating thermal coal exports, eliminating subsidies in the finance for fossil fuels, our clean power advantage, cutting pollution, accelerating our net zero industrial transformation with transcending a retrofit.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Speaking of lies, right? Yeah, CO2 is the demon. It just happens to be the basis of life on this planet. I think Texas summed it up when we watched it earlier on TV, where you've got a windmill made out of hydrocarbons being hosed down with hydrocarbons from a helicopter running on hydrocarbons while Texans froze to death in the dark. Like, this is about the redistribution of wealth. Wind, solar, we're not there yet. And dumping into this is going to be nothing but landfill problems 20 to 30 years from now. It's the first mover costs on this. Like, government is so slow and bad at this. We need to get out of the way, let innovation happen, right? Like, there is projects around the world right now that are like ITER in the south of France. They're building a thermonuclear reactor and going to be the first energy positive fusion reactor. Why aren't we doing that? We're building windmills. It's ridiculous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. This will be the last question for today. And so the students would like to ask, how are you going to tackle racism in your communities? Mr. Cannings, you may start.
Well, thank you. And, you know, we know one of the big wake-up calls we've had over the last year around the world really is the extent of systemic racism in our societies. We've learned about systemic racism in the RCMP, and yet, you know, the Prime Minister takes a knee one day on racism and takes Indigenous kids to court the next. We have to get serious about this. People may not realize it's happening. I've talked to retired RCMP members from Penticton who talked about the racism that they found within the detachment in Penticton over the last 30 years, taking First Nations people up into the mountains and dropping them off at night, just like we heard in the prairies. This is something that we have to tackle. We have to tackle online hate and white supremacy. No one should be made to feel like they don't belong, and we have to call it out whenever we see it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Canning. We will now be hearing from Ms. Tara House.
Racism is alive and well at our local community and in all of our systems, the health, the judicial, the political, and we have to start being comfortable with saying this word. We have to start being comfortable saying systemic racism and systemic discrimination exists, because until we start actually saying that and naming that problem, we'll never be able to move past it and learn and how we can educate or re-educate ourselves. You know, our entire history, or this entire country the country of Canada was founded on very racist tones of trying to eliminate the Indian and the Indian kid. You know, that's a Sir John A. Macdonald quote, and we don't talk about that enough. And so until we start saying things like, I'm a settler and I'm okay with that, and then learning what that means, we won't be able to move past it. And so we have to start, again, investing in our education system. The fact that you are asking this question blatantly is a really incredible and positive step. And I have so much hope for young people to be pushing the older generations to address this.
Thank you so very much, Ms. House. Next, we'll be hearing from Helena Conan.
Yes, thanks. Again, I'm going to say that as member of parliament, I will represent everyone in my riding, regardless of ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, making sure that there's no discrimination. I will fight for that. When I was working for the city of Penticton as a city councillor, we worked on creating policies to increase diversity. And I know that in the community of Trail and other communities throughout our riding, they're doing the same. I will fight for equal rights in every community. Nobody should be left behind. And I promise to be there for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Conan. We will now be hearing from Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to point out that I am the only visible minority candidate. I am Indigenous, and my grandmother did attend Kamloops Indian Residential School, survived it for 2 years. And, you know, I've seen racism in healthcare. I mean, it's pretty blatant. And with Joyce Echaquan, I mean, these are the things that are the realities for me and my people. And the things that I fight back is that I have the teachings of my grandmother to show care, compassion, the wisdom behind that no matter how much negativity or hate they throw at you, that you have to rise above that. And that's what I would do by having an open door policy here in the riding. No matter what political stripe or your beliefs or values, you can come talk to me about these issues at hand. But again, we all have to call it out where it is and make a stand together, because that's what it's about. We're all in this together. So I thank you for the question, and that, you know, I do take this question to a grain of salt, because I'm the only one that's probably ever faced these types of issues at hand. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. Mr. Taylor, you may begin.
We live in an awesome country and one of the most open and tolerant societies. This narrative that trying to convince everyone that we were built on a foundation of hate and genocide, and the best way I think we can fight these things is the abolition of the Indian Act. I'm a member of the one party that wants to get rid of this paternalistic document. And while I don't agree with a lot of the narrative being said, I look at the treatment of the Aboriginal communities in this country, which I've worked in since I was a young man, as a stain on us. And it's a legacy of socialism. right? You're not allowed to own private property. The government has total economic control, tells you how to live, and we see the despair that that creates. And it's not a monolithic block. There's bands out there that are crushing it right now. But my experience up north, you know, working as a paramedic with these communities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
We unfortunately have run out of time to get through all the questions, but we would like to end with a short closing statement from each candidate. Please keep your statements to 30 seconds each. We will now begin with Richard Cannings.
Well, I'd like to thank Jael Crow and all the students and teachers once again for putting this forum on. As we've said, it's these high school forums, even elementary school forums I've had, have been so informative to me as to not only what's on the minds of young people, but how engaged they are. And this is so important when we're speaking of elections. And so I urge all the students out there to stay engaged, to get involved in your community in whatever way you can to further your concerns and interests. And you know, the NDP, as I said, we want you to be able to vote at the age of 16.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings. Ms. House, you may begin.
Thank you. I really do once again appreciate the teachers doing this. And it's why we have to support our educators, because it is through you that you'll be able to speak to the students about why civic engagement is necessary and why we need to be addressing and calling out racist, hurtful, misogynistic, queer-phobic comments. We should not be tolerating this at all. I need to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara. You'll now be hearing from Helena Conans.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for putting on this event. Again, I know it wasn't easy, so you did a great job. Please go to my website, helenaconans.ca. There you can find my telephone number, an email address. If you want to find out more about getting involved in government in any level, whether it's a committee or eventually one day running for member of parliament, you can get a hold of me. I would love, as I mentioned, I'm a coach. I'm a professional coach. I'd love to talk to any of you about how you can make a difference in the communities, in your community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conans.
Thank you.
Mr. Robertson, you may begin.
Yes, well, I just want to say thanks to the teachers and students, but you know, teachers are the ones that are shaping for tomorrow of those future leaders. So I appreciate all the hard work that you do. But I just want to take this moment to actually talk to you, the students, to actually compare and contrast all the platforms. Are they costed? Are they vetted? And do they actually have meaningful impacts? Because our climate change, to Indigenous issues, to many healthcare priorities, those are the ones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. Mr. Taylor, you may begin.
So disappointed about this format. I'd love to see you guys in person. I'm in Millennium Park in Castlegar tonight at 5:30. If anyone wants to come down, I'd love to have a better talk with you. These guys are wrecking our country and we need to stop it. So yeah, hang in there, guys, head on a swivel. Hey, we're resilient. We'll get through this.
Due to our school schedule, our time has unfortunately come to an end today. We would like to sincerely thank all the candidates for their time today, and thank you to all the students and staff for participating in this forum. We would like to wish everyone a very wonderful day. Thank you so much.